1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hi, this is a test. I am learning how to explain stuff in the least amount of time possible. I'm using Tilt Brush to explain the CS50 Mario character set. In the Mario challenge, you have to make a pyramid out of octothorpes, also known as hashtags. Let me just give a quick introduction to how to make a pyramid in pretty much any sort of language that has these characters. First, we're going to just use the octothorpe and the new line. Octothorpe, also known as hashtag, is right here. Oh, sorry. Okay, so let's say that we're starting with a simple console log of one single octothorpe. This is a 1x1 pyramid. Boom. Now let's say that we want a pyramid with 2 levels. If we want a pyramid with 2 levels, we're going to need to make a second level. To make a second level in a string, we add a new line character. Now, you represent this with a backward /n, \n. It's 2 characters in the text editor. It's 1 character once the C compiler processes it, or JavaScript parses it. So this would be, if you print this right now, it would print octothorpe and then print new line, meaning that it would give octothorpe and then go to make a blank line and the next line in the console. If you have a string that is octothorpe new line octothorpe, when it comes to actually printing, the new line character will not show. However, you will see the 2 octothorpes, one on top of another. So this is how this would print. This is a 1 wide, 2 height. This is not what we want. What we want is 1 on top and 2 on the bottom. To do this, we add a second octothorpe after the new line. Once you print this, it'll show like this. Now, if you notice, this does not look anything like the reference. The reference shows all the octothorpes aligning to the right. Now, how do we do this? We do this by adding white space. White space, also known as just space, just as literally the space bar, is a character. When you use a text editor and make a space, programming languages actually consider that a separate character. So let's go ahead and make a new string. So the new string starts with white space, continues with octothorpe, new line, octothorpe, octothorpe. If you were to print it, it'll look much different. It'll look like this. So it would be space, octothorpe, new line, which does not show up in the console, octothorpe, octothorpe. Now, the actual reference exercise is different from this. It has 2 octothorpes at the top at all times. So you don't start with 1, you have to start with 2. In this case then, it would be octothorpe space, in this case we would just, let's just start from the beginning. Woo! Okay. So what you actually want to do for the challenge is, if you have a 1 level pyramid, you need to start it off with 2 octothorpes. For a 2 level pyramid, you add a second level, adding a new line, and 3 octothorpes at the bottom. If you were to print this, it would show up literally like this. Now, we have 3 at the bottom. Whatever number of characters you have at the bottom is always going to be one more than the height of the pyramid. So in this case, we would be taking number 2 as the input, and that would be the number of lines. One quick way to analyze this would be that you always end up with the last line having one more octothorpe than the input number, or one less new line than the input number, meaning that if the input is 2, you're going to have 1 new line and 3 octothorpes at the base. Okay, so moving on, let's make this a bit more complicated. So something with height of 3 would look like this. Now, notice I'm not using any new line, any white space. If we want it to actually have that white space, we need to literally add the white character before the hashtag or octothorpes. So let's first make some space here. Again, you're going to be doing this programmatically in C. It is a bit different than how I'm doing it. The whole purpose of me explaining it this way is that this is not cheating. No matter how well I explain this visually, it is not a 1-1 representation of doing it with actual code. So if you can follow through with this, even if you don't understand how the code works exactly, you should have an idea of the logic behind this. Okay, so this is a 3 pyramid in the Mario style. Notice that it has 2 on the top. It starts with 2 characters, 2 white spaces, which is again the number of total new lines. Each single line is always going to have be the same width as all valid characters. In this case, space, octothorpe, octothorpe. It sums up to 4. That's 1 more than the input, which is 3. So what you're going to do for each single line is that you're going to have to keep track of on which level you are. If you're on the top level, we could call this level 0 or level 3, depending on how you prefer to do it. But you have to programmatically calculate this using variables. So if you have a for loop, you're going to be iterating from 0 to 3, and in the first iteration you're going to be calculating, let's say the pseudocode. Okay, so for again, I'm doing this in JavaScript style. This is not C. It's going to be a bit different. For I equals 0, I less than 3, I plus plus. For I, you're going to have to calculate how many white spaces it has. In this case, the number of white spaces is going to be, let's give, instead of 3, let's make it a variable. So let's give let input equals 3, and okay, so we're doing no. Okay, so for the 0th line, we're going to have white. So for each single one of these lines, it should be a fairly simple formula. You'll get more used to this as time goes by. So let whites on the first line, it's going to be input -1 minus I. I in this case stands for iteration. So on the first line, this one, it's going to be 3 minus 1. Oh, sorry. Yeah, okay, 3 minus 1 minus 0. That'll give me 2. So let's say that you have a string. Let's call it output. Let output equal empty string. Whoa. So you're starting with an empty string, and the first step is to do something. I'm not even going to write it down. That'll add this number of white spaces. In this case, you're going to have 2. You could make another for loop that or just a while loop, while white minus blah blah blah, input plus equals space. I'm just leaving the space right here. So on each iteration, it'll calculate the number of white spaces it should add, and while there's and this will basically make it so that if it's a 2, first iteration, blah blah blah, does this and decreases the value of white. Does it once, does it a second time. On the third time, the value of white is 0. Therefore, the while loop will cancel itself. So first iteration, blah blah blah. Here you have adds 2 white spaces. Now for the octo. So for the octothorpe, it's going to be different. It'll start with 2. It's 2 plus I. So first line, octo is going to have a value of 2. You do something similar to what you did with the whites, and it'll give you 2 iterations of adding an octothorpe. So it's octothorpe. So it's going to first add white space, and then octothorpe. After this, whatever you decide to write it as, probably similar to this, you're going to be basically done. So you just add a new line. In this case, just input plus equals new line. New line. In C, there's a character. It's different from JavaScript. You're going to have to research it. In C, there's different data types for characters and for strings. Strings are arrays of characters. It should probably make more sense. If you have any questions after this, please ask me. This is really just a rough draft. Trying to be able to use this format. This is the first time I'm doing it. So you have input plus equals new line. It might be input push. There's a good chance that in C you're going to have to initialize this as an array. C does not have let. I'm using this with JavaScript notation. There's a book called the C programming language, which goes over all the basics. It should also be okay to do it in JavaScript if you feel more comfortable with it. So then, first iteration of loop gives you this line. Second iteration, I equals 1, therefore y equals 3 minus 1 minus 1, 1. That 1 does 1. Octothorpe's is going to be 2 plus 1. That'll give 3. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then finally on each iteration of the loop, you add a new line somehow, not necessarily using plus equals. I'm not sure if it'll work on C, and that'll be the end of it. As this is right now, it would also add a new line right at the end. That should not be a problem. Yeah, so just close this. So this is, again, very rough pseudocode. Please feel free to pause it. I don't know if this looks fine. Well, you might want to rewatch this. So, yeah. So programmatically, there's one way that I would break this down is to look at it geometrically. As we talked before, a normal pyramid would just have 1 at the top. So, programmatically speaking, it is kind of weird. It takes a bit of getting used to. For example, this line right there is like the need I have for that minus 1, because it's not a perfect square. If it were a perfect square, you could just add 1 for each value of I, and the last value of I is going to be 0, so it would just even itself out. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. So yeah, I know this is probably not the best explanation, but it's an explanation. Feel free to ask any probing questions. I'll try to follow back. Yep, thanks.